The meeting of the WSESD board will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. And so,
Recording in progress.
So, I'm going to say that the agenda seems to be potentially very full today, so we're going to try to move as efficiently through as possible. Tim?
Okay. First, the good news is that since we extended the deadline for the student reps on the board, we've had excellent candidates from seniors and sophomores and juniors. And Lana and I have interviewed a number of them. They're mature, they're intelligent, they really want to make a difference in the school system. The bad news is that we can only choose two. So I was discussing this problem with David, and he had the brilliant idea of establishing a student board, school board student advisory committee with those who are not student reps on the board, but choosing from the applicants who have applied to establish this board that would meet with one or two board members monthly. I don't think we can never have too many student voices. So I make the motion to establish a school board student advisory.
Tim, first we have to move to amend the agenda.
Oh, okay.
But-
I move to amend the agenda to discuss the student advisory, the student representative protocol.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Tim and seconded by Deborah. All those in favor of amending the agenda to add the item that Tim was referencing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now do you want to make the motion to?
Yeah, so I'm making a motion that the board establish a school board student advisory committee that would be chosen initially from the candidates that are applying for seats on the student board, on the school board.
Okay, so Tim has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Deborah. Is there any discussion? Okay, so all those in favor of a student advisory board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Tim.
The second motion, to follow up from Michelle's suggestion at the last meeting, is to establish a small stipend for the student reps on the board. So I make the motion that we allocate $500 for each student who is chosen to be a student rep on the school board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of a stipend, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
That was easy.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to remind Mr. Maciel to get me the wording on the second motion he made, not the one to amend the agenda, but the longer one after that, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. And I wanted to, I think I can still, amend the agenda to that. So I move to amend the agenda to include a moment of silence and a small presentation for the students and teachers who lost their lives in Texas recently, and also for any people, students, teachers, etc., who have lost their lives in any similar incident recently. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So we'll observe that moment of silence while Paul,
Just trying to get it adjusted.
thank you, Paul. Thank you. And then we will move on to the consent agenda. We have the clerk's report with the approval of minutes for May 17th and May 24th. I do have a couple changes that were requested by Deb Gass for the May 3rd and May 17th. So I guess I will address the May 3rd first. So the proposed changes to the May 3rd minutes were, the correct version should read, EES Director Deb Gass discussed the item and its guidance, which is to increase staff salaries by at least 2.28%, not 2.8% as noted in the current minutes, for COLA and quality improvements. She said the Policy Council's recommendation is to give everyone this raise as well as an additional dollar raise to their hourly pay rate. The funds will be awarded on July 1st. So is there a is there a motion to amend the May 3rd minutes as described?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, moved by Liz and seconded by David. Thank you. All those in favor of amending the May 3rd minutes as noted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could you get me the exact
Yes.
wording on that, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Then the May 17th, we have a request to amend those minutes by Deb Gass. EES Director Deb Gass reported on the recent inspection and failure of the 2 fire escape stairways at the Canal Street School. After much searching, Deb found an inspector who declared both structures are in need of repair, including a roof built over them to prevent further deterioration. The estimated cost is $95,000. Current minutes read $81,000, but Deb indicates she reported $91,000, and the final bid is closer to $95,000. Deb said she recently learned about a grant opportunity to fund the project from the Regional Head Start Office. It is very time sensitive, she said. Is there
Motion to accept the amended minutes as presented.
Second.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Liz. All those in favor of approving the edits to the May 17th minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now we move on to the May 24th minutes. Is there a motion to amend the May 24th minutes?
So moved.
moved.
Okay, so who was it online that spoke up?
That was Lana. Lana.
Okay, so thank you, Lana, and David, it sounds like you're seconding him? Okay, all those in favor of approving the May 24th minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now we will move on to finances.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
sorry, clarification, the May 3rd minutes got amended, the May 17th were accepted with edits, and then the May 24th minutes were just straight approved.
Yes.
No amendments.
correct,
Thank you.
and I can get you both of those.
Okay, great, thank you.
So on to the finances. We have warrants of April 11th, 2022 of $66,075.34. Warrants of April 18th, 2022 of $150,950.78. April 25th, 2022 of $413,426.78. Warrants of May 2nd, 2022 of $116,909.60. May 9th, 2022 of $821,080.32. Warrants of May 16, 2022 of $178,293.74. Warrants of May 23rd, 2022 of $202,303.56. And warrants of May 31st, 2022 of $621,574.91.
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of approving the warrants as described, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We will move on to the payrolls. Payrolls of April 8th, 2022 of $1,367,342.33. April 22nd, 2022 of $1,371,915.92. May 9th, 2022 of $1,347,086.89. And May 20th, 2022 of $1,591,346.33. Do we have a motion to approve the payrolls as listed?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ann, and it sounds like Sean may be second. Thank you very much. And all those in favor of approving the payrolls as listed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to public comment on non-agenda items, and we're gonna spend 10 minutes on that. I will say, anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories. Receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration would be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter will be referred to an executive session, or a public hearing would be held on the matter. Do we have anyone here that would like to speak during the public comment? Do we have anyone online? Okay. I'm going to ask one more time. Do we have anyone who would like to speak during public comment? Okay. We're going to move on to unfinished business. The first item is the sexual abuse investigation update, and I'm going to turn to David.
Yeah, and unfortunately, again, we don't really have anything new to report. The investigator continues her work, and we're hoping for a report and but not within days, hopefully within week. The estimate is within weeks, but not days. So again, we're just waiting for that work to be completed.
Okay.
Mindy's got a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mindy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mindy Haskins Rogers, BUHS alum. I'm just, so it sounds like the investigation is wrapping up. Is that what you're saying? And that there will be a report soon?
No, we're hoping that parts of it will be wrapped up and we'll have some partial information or a report. But again, not within days, it'll be weeks. And that's as much information as we have.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
That's as much information as we have.
So I guess I just wanted to know if the board intends to release the findings when the investigation concludes, excuse me.
Could you say that again, please?
Does the board intend to release the findings to the public in some clear way that doesn't reveal any survivor information or compromise survivor privacy? Does the board intend to release the findings to the public when the investigation is concluded?
I think our intention is to release whatever information we can without, damaging somebody or revealing information that we've promised not to reveal. So yes, the intention is to be as transparent and to provide as much information as we can. What that's going to be, we have no idea.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing today. I don't mean to cut you off. So when you say without damaging somebody, is your concern for the reporters or the people who have been reported when you say that?
The people who have reported in confidence.
Are you planning to reveal the names of anybody who has been reported and whose actions have been corroborated by Attorney Goddard?
That we can't possibly say. We haven't seen any evidence. We have no idea what we're going to be looking at or what the information is going to be.
So the board is going to examine her report and so I thought that Attorney Goddard was the one analyzing the evidence and making conclusions.
No, she'll make recommendations in consultation with Attorney Hext, and then they will. We'll get the report, and they'll whatever conclusion she comes to or recommendations the investigator comes to, we'll get that information.
And
I don't think she won't be reporting hearsay. These will be things that she feels there's reasonable or credible evidence that something happened that shouldn't have. But again, we haven't seen any of it, so I'm just purely speculating.
I guess I'm less concerned about hearsay than about this issue of transparency. I mean, I didn't speak with anybody that I thought was telling me hearsay. I believed and saw plenty of evidence and corroborating reports from other people. So I'm not really concerned about hearsay. I'm more concerned about whether the public is going to understand the extent of what happened, the duration, the scope, and really the nature of what happened, so that the community can take steps, not just the steps that the school is taking, but so that the community can take steps to protect their own children too. So I guess I'm curious because Attorney Hext is actually representing the board in any litigation. Is that correct?
We haven't talked about that.
So then what is Attorney Hext's role in working with Attorney Goddard? Because it looks like that might infringe upon at least the appearance of this being an independent investigation. If the board's attorney that would be representing the board is liaising with the attorney who's supposed to be acting independently, I mean, just as a member of the public, I would find that concerning in terms of,
It's a valid concern. It's the exact opposite of why we engaged Attorney Hakes. She is the buffer, I guess is the right word, between us and the investigation, because we may have to have hearings and make decisions based on what the investigator finds. So if we have that information ahead of time, then we're compromised and we won't be able to be objective. So we can't know what's going on. And the administration may be required to take actions, and we can't know that information and require actions of the administration. So we have an attorney to communicate the results of the investigation or the findings or the recommendations of the investigator to the administration, because they need to be separated from the information as well. So it's another layer of removal and of independence for the investigator and for the board to not be to not disqualify themselves from the ability to actually make determinations if there are actions that are required by the board. So that's so that's why we hired Attorney Hakes.
thank you. So currently she's not acting in, she's not representing or defending the board in any litigation. That's not the intent at this point.
No.
Thank you for clarifying that. This is all just
Yeah.
confusing with that. Again, as much information as you are able to give, I think it's reassuring to maybe to the public. I mean, I have contact with certain members of the public. I think it would be reassuring to have just as much information about the process as you're able to give. And thank you for that clarification.
And just Michelle wants to say something. I just want to mention that we pretty regularly send another list of questions about, can we tell people this? Can we tell people that? Can we explain this or that? And generally the response is no. We really just have to just stay away from it until the investigations are finished. And it's frustrating for us and damaging for people that are watching what's going on. And we understand that. We just are powerless to do anything about it if we want to do it right.
When you say you send questions, to whom are you sending the questions?
To Attorney Hakes to confer with the investigator.
Okay.
Like, can we? An example would be, can we do what I just did, which is explain what her role is? And I think we asked about explaining roles, and she said no. They said no to that too. So anyway, that's too much. I'm going to get in trouble if I say this.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing, which is that I'm so glad that this investigation is happening, and I have a lot of confidence in all of the board members. I think you all have the right intent, but the sort of muzzling of information is concerning, because there were investigations in the past. We know that. There was an investigation in 1985, and I was sent right back into the classroom with Hecker without any notification. My parents didn't know, and we were all subjected to the same behaviors immediately after the investigation. And we know he was investigated in 2009, and nobody in the public was notified. And so he continued to work in organizations that brought him into proximity with minors for 10 more years. So that's why I feel very anxious about the handling of the information, because the investigation itself doesn't mark a change necessarily. I mean, again, I trust all of your intent. It's just what will make the difference is the way that the kinds of actions that are taken, but also the public awareness of what has transpired and how it's going to be addressed and how they can take actions. There will always be another person who's a predator. There will always be another predator. The only thing that will make a difference in the safety of kids is the systems that we put in place to protect them, and the training we give people to make sure that they understand what they're looking for and what to report and what's reportable, and the training we give people so that they understand appropriate boundaries in those settings. So, and that's not me, of course. I'm not one of we doing all that work. It's all of you and what you decide to do. But so that's where a lot of the anxiety comes from, is that we've seen investigations in the past where information ended up being withheld and people were not able to take action to protect themselves or their kids. So thank you for as much transparency as possible. And I really hope that, I'll put some comments in writing because I think I have some comments from survivors about concerns about the final press release and I'll share that in writing, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle?
I just wanted to comment on this exchange and what I'm hearing. But first, I wanted to remind Mindy and anyone listening that the scope of this investigation is a little bit different because we aren't just investigating, an allegation. We're investigating things from the past and if our school district and supervisory union did the right thing. So it's not as cut and dry, and it is why we need to preserve, our objectivity and be really separate from it. But the reason I raised my hand was just because what it sounded like I was hearing David say, and maybe I'm the only one that heard this, but it sounded like the investigation is ongoing, but pieces of it are wrapping up, and the exchange I was hearing sounded like maybe more is expected. And I just want to be really clear that the investigation is ongoing and is going to probably take considerably longer amount of time. We're still working, I know, on just things like communicating and outreach. So I don't know anything about what might be wrapped up and brought before the board or shared, and I know our intentions are to be as transparent as possible, but I just think it's really important that everyone in the public understands that this is ongoing. There is no deadline, and the attorney's still, her phones are on, and we're still looking on ways to reach out to the community and know that, anything that they feel that they want to share is relevant. I just think that's really important to be aware of.
Thank you for clarifying that, because it's actually, this is gonna go on for a lot longer. We had written and asked, are there any partial findings that we might be able to report? And she said possibly, but it will be weeks, not days. So again, thank you for clarifying that.
Paul, is there someone else?
Sherry Keith has a hand up.
Yes, my concern is whether the district plans on releasing any more press releases before the investigation wraps up, so survivors have time to come forward before it is finished. That's a big concern of mine because some survivors did not know about this, may live outside of the community. So I think additional press releases would be helpful in that respect.
Yes, we absolutely are. That's one of the things that we've been working on is a much more comprehensive outreach plan that involves a lot of the things that Mindy listed, as well as what you just suggested, Sherry, which is press releases, but also a much broader approach so that it's not just an article that some people see in the paper or hear about word of mouth, but it's much more broadly circulated. But again, it's been a very busy spring, and we're hoping to be able to do that work in the summer.
Sherry, I would request if you have locations or sort of sources that we can consider reaching out to people. I'm not asking for names or anything, any details or anything like that, but if you have like avenues that you feel based on who has reached out to you, if you feel it would be helpful for the investigation to know of those, so maybe we can, might be able to use those in the outreach, that might be helpful. And if you feel comfortable sending me or any of the board members an email with any information that you feel or even the investigator, Amy Goddard, if you feel that you have any information that might be helpful in that outreach, please feel free to let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and I will confer with people who have contacted me in regard to that.
Thank you.
Mindy has a hand back up.
Okay. Mindy?
I'm sorry, I had just one more comment, and that is that we've seen, since I published my piece last August, we've seen how that brought forth a lot of people with reports and information about the same individual. And we know that, I am aware that in at least a couple of the cases that have been told to me, there's likely to be, I just think that it's important at some point if names of corroborated let me see. If names are released, it is likely to give opportunity to other people who might have been harmed by the same individuals to come forward, if that makes any sense, because there are people who carry these secrets or carry these stories, and knowing that one person has come forward about someone who harmed them, who's the same perpetrator, I think can really help them to come forward themselves. And I'm going to forward you an article that I read recently, and I just wanted, I'm not saying it in a very articulate way, but I think that at some point before Attorney Goddard closes her investigation or becomes unavailable to receive further reports, naming of people actually has a huge value because other people will be emboldened to come forward if they want to report about those about actions by those same individuals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Paul? Okay. So we are going to move on to update to follow-up plans regarding SRO task force recommendations. Mark, did you have any sort of update for us?
Sure. Well, Chris had sent along that written report. That's about where we are right now in the process. He has reached out to Chief Hardy and has consulted with her. At this time, the police department cannot commit a specific liaison officer to be on call. However, ongoing discussions with Chief Hardy around response time are happening. So that connection has been made, which is nice. And I think Sheriff Anderson will be part of that communication as well. I know the Dean of Students, Cassie, today met with Michaela and some of the students from the SRO committee who did that work. So I heard that was a really good meeting, focused on really school community and increasing belonging, student engagement, teacher engagement, overall school climate, how effective the RJ process is when harm happens, that it's important to, heal that harm and go through a process. Michaela, I wasn't at that meeting. Maybe, do you want to share a little bit about that, or?
The students that were there are here.
Okay.
Some of them. I compiled some notes from a meeting that I had with the students, based on the report, just some recommendations they had about restorative justice more broadly being integrated into not only the discipline, I put in quotes, but also within the classroom and throughout the school community, and raising it above consequences is one thing. Are there other things you want to add to that, Kaya, and then I can follow up?
Sorry, the light's flickering, it's just messing
Drew
with
you
me.
up? Drew you off? No.
Yeah, Michaela basically covered it. We talked a lot about really expanding restorative justice because it is a really, really helpful skill to have, even just within classrooms with teacher to student, just knowing that sort of process and being able to handle situations much faster and in a way that's helpful to both anyone involved, really. And we talked a lot about the climate, that's the school climate this year, and how we would really like to see some changes within the school, because it's been a really tough year for everyone within the school. So we talked a lot about different changes that we would like to see, and that some of the ideas that the dean also had as well. So we went back and forth with discussion with some of those.
Some of which are giving students choice, especially in opening activities in the school, like having something almost like intercession. Another student said that she has something in her school called Skills Week, where students can choose what they do the first week of school, in between semesters, and the last week of school. So thinking of something that really plays and connects student interest with teacher interest. There's also discussion about the idea of having teachers monitor the halls and the bathrooms. They're thinking about that actually contributing to a negative climate, and students not being interested in having their teachers follow them around the school, and the feeling of being watched, which has been an issue over the years. And so thinking of and really tapping into student interest as a way to prevent kids congregating in the bathroom as opposed to just like watching them to prevent them congregating in the bathroom. So really looking at proactive approaches before we get to the place where there needs to be intervention. So how do we prevent it from getting even to the restorative justice? And the real need for community, and that the reason why students are congregating is because there's not a lot of social time and there aren't many social places. So that's kind of the discussion that we were having. And then I sent him, Chris Day is the him who comes up, and Cassie the notes, and I could send them also to you that we have them.
Yeah, so those are great discussions, and I know there's plans for follow-up discussions next week as well. So I think it's really important that we rethink how we start next school year in comparison to this school year. And that's living and learning, right? So that's where we are.
The SRO report called for better, more counseling. At the last Leadership Council at BUHS, they passed a motion to hire immediately another mental health counselor. This is a request that was made 2 years ago by a mental health counselor. This is an action that should be taken immediately, I think. Given the events in this country, we know how important mental health counseling can be. So why don't we just post using the SRO funds that would have been used for the SRO, apply that to a mental health counselor and immediately post a job opening for another counselor?
Yep, so Frank and I looked into that in terms of a budget line. And I will say we have just recently hired some social workers that were just recently announced. That SRO line item, unfortunately, only had, was it $30,000 in that line item? So we can think creatively how to use that fund, but it's not enough for a position. But I think as we, close the books on this year and kind of see where we are in terms of staffing, that would certainly be something we explore over the summer before the school year starts.
I would urge you to really find the funding for this. It's important. It's something that the students are calling for, that the staff is calling for.
Yeah. Yeah, high school needs as much support as we can give them, and that is absolutely the intent.
Anything else? Does anyone else have any, or Paul, was there someone online?
No.
Okay. Anyone from the board, any comments, questions? Okay, so thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much for your contribution. So now we will move on to committee assignments. I have 2 items. Emily needs, if you can confirm for me, Emily, that you wanted to be added to the PPEC and the Academy Leadership Council?
Yes.
Okay. And David wanted to be added to the Finance Committee. Okay. Was there anyone else who wanted to do any more additions to anywhere else? Okay, so do we have a motion to add Emily to the PPEC and the Academy Leadership Council and David to the Finance Committee?
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor of adding Emily to the PPEC and Academy Leadership Council and David to the Finance Committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Now we will move on to the administration report.
Can I just make mention of the policy and
Yes,
amendment
yes,
committee,
please.
which met on June 2nd for 90 minutes and will meet again on June 14th. The members of that committee are David, Tim, Sean, and Liz.
And you.
And me, I'm sorry, and me, yes, Deborah. And so we really do want the public to be involved. We are involved in a review of policy edits by the Vermont School Board Association, as well as the ongoing regular assessments that the board is to do looking at basic policies. So that's the work we're doing. We're planning for the moment to meet twice monthly. There's a terrific backlog. And again, we invite the public to participate. The agendas and the meetings and the minutes are about as detailed as they can get on the WSESD website. So you can easily see what we are going to be talking about in a given meeting. If you have any questions, please reach out to any of us with your concerns, and it's Zoom accessible. Thank you.
Thank
Was
you.
it favorite time for,
Yes,
an update from personnel? As of May 31st, containing all three entities, the SU, the SD, and Vernon, we've had 35 new hires, 10 rehires of current staff on one-year contracts, approximately 25 changes of current employees for the next school year, for example, going to another school or another grade, and we have approximately 50 current positions open and being advertised. The good news is we did indeed hire a new counselor for BUHS. So, that's it.
thank you. Any other committee-related items? Okay, we really are moving on to the administration report now.
Okay.
Liz has a question.
Liz,
Hi. We hired a assistant principal, I think, for BUHS, but I can't remember the name, but there's a lot of unease in the community there, and I think that they should know that we have already hired somebody. If anybody can remember the name, that would be great.
Tracy Lane.
Yep, Miss Lane.
did you hear that, Liz?
Excuse me?
Tracy Lang?
I think,
Tracy Lane.
yeah, okay, great. But I thought the public might like to know that because personnel's been meeting, but those hires haven't been announced at one of our meetings. So for everybody out there, we have an assistant principal for next year.
Interim assistant principal, I believe she's been hired to fill Mr. Day's position until he returns from his military leave.
Correct.
An interim position.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is she a current employee that is moved up or somebody new into our district?
New to the district.
New to the district,
Yeah.
okay. I'm really glad that we have a female in leadership at high school right now.
Yeah.
It's well needed.
We also have the dean of students, who's a woman, so.
We do.
And Tracy will be spending the full day tomorrow here on campus, working with Cassie and meeting with kids and getting a feel for the school, so.
Can you give us a little background on her? Where she's coming from?
I can't at the moment, I don't have her resume in front of me, I was not on the interview team that hired her. So,
Thank you.
but I will be spending time with her tomorrow at UHS, I'm looking forward to that. So as we wrap up the end of the school year, I think I've shared this before, but it's the busiest time of a school year is these final weeks as we're, approaching graduation and trying to finalize hiring and trying to embrace our traditions that we've had at our schools. And it's been a long, as we know, it's been a long, stressful year with lots of road bumps along the way. But I would like to just take some time to celebrate the school year in reflection. We didn't know what the school year was going to bring us in September, especially around COVID. But we had an emphasis on the importance of in-person learning and sticking to that. And we got a week and a half left of school, and we did. We did that. We focused on in-person learning all school year. We had our challenges, we had quarantine, we had to continue to work on remote options to support families and kids, and some were great, some were not. But having been working in the schools over the last 3 years with all of the challenges of COVID, I think we owe it to ourselves to reflect and celebrate on what we have accomplished this year, which is we've done it. Kids are graduating in a couple of weeks, or next week actually. Kids in all of our schools will be graduating, and we'll be working on transition plans for next year, and how we're learning from this year to open up next year's school year. So just feels good to say that out loud. You know, we got through a challenging year, and we continued to emphasize the importance of in-person, and we did it.
Can I like clap?
Yeah. Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
As a parent in the school district, I actually was just thinking as I was rushing to get here, suddenly with 4 kids that are school age and they have a life again. And it means I'm stretched thin, but it's because my kids are doing things and they have stuff scheduled after school, and it's a little surreal. It's been a long 2 years, really. So thank you, everybody, for what you've done. It's been a lot of hard work.
And before this meeting, I was over at the baseball field watching the semifinals for the state championship, and they won 2-1. Just got the text message.
Nice.
And I was sitting with Ricky Davidson and Cassie, and we were, looking around. The place was packed.
Yes.
And it was packed with kids from the school cheering on the team and their fellow peers. And it was chock full of teachers as well. Of course, family members. But it was a really great thing to see. And I've gone to many events this year throughout this school year. And that's been a common theme that I've noticed from our student body. Whether it be a music performance, a sport, an athletic performance, I've consistently seen lots of kids at these activities cheering on their peers. And, Ricky and I had a nice interaction talking about that. And, kudos to our kids for doing that. It goes a long way in building community. And I think we have to, embrace that next year as well as we move forward into the next phase of COVID recovery.
Tim?
Comment and question. At the Leadership Council, it's mentioned the tremendous support for the Special Olympics events that have happened at BUHS.
Yes.
Not only from families of the athletes, but everybody really supported the Special Olympics. So kudos for BUHS for that.
Yes.
The question is from a member of the public who wants to know if the graduation ceremony and the senior awards night will be filmed. And more broadly, they're wondering if more details about graduation will be forthcoming.
Yes, more details forthcoming. They've always been filmed, and they've always been filmed, and the intention is that they will be this year as well.
Good.
And weather dependent, I'm hoping we're all outdoors on the field so that many people can come to celebrate.
Can I add to that, Mark? That at BAMS, we're going to be out on the field again this year. We started last year for the first time, and it was terrific. And BTTV will be live broadcast.
Tim, same question to
And graduation is Friday the 17th for BUHS.
And for FAMS?
Wednesday the 15th. Is it 15th?
Okay.
Yeah.
Last meeting, I talked about some accomplishments around EST and developing a common EST process for our school district. I thought it would be a nice opportunity to provide more details around that tonight and what that looks like and how that work has shaped from September to now. And so I've asked John Sessions to kind of share a presentation based on the work that we've all collectively done. And the reason I picked John is because he has been a leader in this work with our group. Liz Dimmick was also highlighted at our last meeting. And then collectively, it's been a group approach. And also, John will be starting in just a couple of weeks. He'll have his own school. So I thought, having that framework of walking into a new school and how helpful it would be to have a process like this already established and not having to make it up along the way. So I think John will present for 5, maybe 10 minutes around the process we took in identifying best practice and what we have developed to support EST at all of our schools starting in September.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Yep.
I have a couple slides here that I think Paul.
You emailed to me?
I did, Paul.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
If you can, sure thing.
Where we are.
Hi everybody, John Sessions. I'm currently the assistant principal at Academy School. Have been for 4 years, and prior to that, a teacher in the district. As Mark mentioned, I'm transitioning to be the principal at Putney Central next year, which I'm excited about. I'm also a doctoral student at the University of Vermont, and a lot of my work is around educational support teams and EST structures. And so working with Mark and our leadership team here has been a nice way to sort of bridge that gap between research and policy that's happening at the state level and national level around ESTs to actually put it in practice in our district and to take some of that research and work and to put that into action. So I came to this board in November and talked about educational support teams. And as Mark said, since that time, we've spent a good chunk of time every month at our monthly leadership team refining our approach to educational support teams. And so I want to start by just a quick sort of review, or just around quick touching on what ESTs are and why they're important, and then what our approach has been as a district. So you can see just a quick sort of diagram of where ESTs sort of fall within our complex networks that schools are. Schools are very complex beings. What educational support teams do is they function as this sort of central team to connect students in need of support with the supports that we have in our schools. And so, we are very fortunate in our district, thanks to the work of everybody in this room, to have a wealth of supports available to students, whether it's academic support, whether it's behavioral support, emotional support, restorative justice work, connection with families and community support. These are all really unique opportunities for students and families that are embedded into all of our schools, which is really phenomenal work as a district. The challenge and the need for this work of educational support teams is how to connect the people that need that support to the supports that are there. And that's where educational support teams come into play. And sort of the general process is a concern is raised about a student or a family or generally students or families or maybe a dynamic, and that's brought to the educational support team, and their work is to proactively connect that student or that family to supports that we have in our school. And so it's a really critical function of a school, and every school in our district has an educational support team. Every school in the state has an educational support team. But our work has been really to sort of fine-tune that process and to have some continuity from school to school in terms of how those teams are functioning and things like that. Couple notes on why these teams are important, which is on my next slide there, Paul, if you can flip it up.
Can we check to make sure that folks can actually see the share?
Sure.
I'm not sure that it is.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I think this is somebody else.
Well, I'll keep talking while Paul is
see if I can make
looking
it
at it.
work.
The reality is this year we're seeing an increase in need for teams such as this and for students in need of support. The pandemic has impacted all of us to varying degrees. But having high-functioning educational support teams at the core of our schools is more important now than ever. I can speak to Academy where, roughly 20% of our student body has been referred to an educational support team. And that's just this year alone, So I think when it's all said and done between kindergarten and sixth grade, at least at the elementary level, I bet half of our students are impacted by an educational support team.
Can I ask, where does
Sure.
that fall in line with comparing statewide or what? Is there?
I think it's pretty much in line, Kelly. Various other schools and districts have less active EST teams, and so they may get fewer referrals because they don't have meaningful action that comes out of them. And I think in our schools that have a high number of referrals, that's actually a positive sign because it means the team is doing its job and they're leading to meaningful action to support a student and a family. So when we see a high number of referrals, I view that as a good thing, because it's working. The system's working. Another reason why it's important is that it's an avenue for families to get involved because families are a critical piece of the educational support team. They're always invited. They're typically present at meetings. And it's a way for parents and community members and families to be involved in designing and implementing supports for students. So it's another reason why we really value this work. And with state initiatives that we've talked about at this meeting, especially Act 173, sort of puts an increased pressure on schools' general education system to be able to respond to needs. And so I think, kudos to Mark as superintendent and to our district as a whole in really prioritizing this work because it's critical now and it's going to become more important going forward. So in terms of what we've done, Paul, I don't know if you can, but I'm on slide 3.
Oh, sorry.
If possible, yeah. So here's things that we've done this year. So we've engaged in professional development as a leadership team with Judy Maynard, who's sort of a leadership coach, supports a lot of districts around the state, but has been spending a lot of time with us down here in terms of sort of refining our EST practice and our systems of supports for students. And Judy's been a great help both at individual school levels and supporting our leadership team. And then we've been engaging a lot with research and literature around EST best practices. We're not inventing the wheel here in Windham Southeast. There's a wealth of research out there around EST best practices, and we're letting that guide our work as a district. So we spent a lot of time identifying critical elements of the EST process. And with that framework, we've reflected on where our schools are in terms of implementing effective EST systems, different practices in different schools, and we've sort of shared out what has been impactful at each school location. And then we've identified goals and needed areas of development collectively and individually at our schools. And so then we sort of taken the next step of developing, as Mark mentioned, sort of common practices around all of our district schools, of what sort of we hold as critical pieces of educational support teams that will be present in every school around our district. Which, as Mark mentioned, for me, as an example, being a new principal in a school, to know that that structure is there. And that's not a piece that you have to invent when you get to a new school. There's a lot of benefits to that. It's just a quick sort of breakdown of steps of the EST process and some work that we've done. Paul, those are live links there. So if you can click on pre-referral, you can sort of pull up some documents that we've created as a district team. This is, sort of the initial phase is before a referral happens. What are we doing to support students? And we've created what's called, referred to as a Kid Talk form. But essentially, it's valuing teaching teams and giving them the structure to proactively talk about students, really sort of at the classroom level, really proactively. And so we have sort of structured how those conversations happen, what data they might look at, things like that. And then, a piece that we were talking about in our last leadership meeting last Friday is it's also important to give teams time to be able to have these conversations. And so when we're building our master schedules and things like that in our schools, making sure that we're allowing teacher collaboration time to talk about students who might be struggling, and what they can do now before that struggle grows, which happens. And so that's a piece too of restructuring our schools and our schedule to allow for that teacher collaboration time, which can often get overlooked. And so prioritizing that as we build our schedules has been part of our work as a team.
I know how difficult it is to find the time.
Yeah.
And I know how resistant schools can be, necessarily so, in giving teachers release time to collaborate.
Yes.
So how are you creating that time?
Well, right, it's different from school to school, Deborah. I can give you an example at Academy right now. We utilize substitute teachers, and we relieve classroom teaching teams for 2 hours every other week to be able to have that team collaboration time. We also have contracted staff meeting time every Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4 for all certified staff, and many of our schools, I'm sure all of our schools, dedicate at least 2 of those times a month to be team time, where teachers can just work within their team and collaborate. And so we're not filling all of those necessarily with staff meetings, but allowing that time. Some schools are taking alternatives. I know John is getting really creative with his scheduling for next year at Guilford Central, with allowing teachers extended time on Wednesday afternoons, and so arranging, other enrichment opportunities for students that are done by, I would imagine specials teachers and paraeducators and other people throughout the building to free up teaching staff to have that time. So it's really the process of looking at all the resources that we have to be able to do that.
So Deborah, just to add to that, my hope is for our final meeting before the break this summer is to do another presentation similar to this around our work on MTSS and how that connects to EST and how essential master scheduling is to support the utilization of our resources. So we will dig into that deeper on the 21st.
So my other question or request is, it's hard to see it on the screen and to absorb it.
Sure.
So is it possible for these, for this PowerPoint to be sent to the board?
That's gonna be my question.
So that we can actually see it and think about it and absorb it?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Tim, you.
So, at the high school level, we know for a fact that chronic absenteeism is tied directly to dropout rates. Strong correlation. Is EST kind of an early alert system?
Yes. Yeah, very good question. Well, one of the things that we've been working on a lot at Academy and will be sort of brought to other schools is having these teams proactively look at data on a really regular basis, including attendance data. And so we have a system where, currently where 10 absences automatically triggers a referral to the educational support team to sort of problem solve around school attendance. And that allows us to be as proactive as possible. And then out of that meeting might come a plan with the family, in conjunction with the family and community supports, like Brattleboro Area Restorative Justice does a lot of things around school attendance and sort of pull in community resources to support attendance.
10 absences throughout the year, or I imagine that if you see like 3 or 4 absences
Yeah.
in September, you'll
Yep.
be
Yeah.
there.
Paul, the referral form, there's a lot, oh, sorry,
Well, it's actually, you can go ahead and finish. It's
Okay.
sort of an end of the law question.
Sure. So we worked as a group, as a leadership team, to create a common referral form around how students might get referred to an educational support team. An important piece of this is that anybody can make a referral. Anybody who has a concern about a student can make a referral. That could be their homeroom teacher, that could be an administrator, that could be a paraeducator, that could be a parent, that could be anybody who has a concern with the student. But this is a form that we created that really sort of captures, what has been done to support this student already, what has been impactful, what has not been impactful. How do we know that the student is struggling? Things like that. So we sort of developed a common referral form to be used across schools, which will be helpful. And then the final document that we've been sort of working on streamlining is a plan. And so an educational support team, when they meet about a student, they develop a plan, an educational support team plan, which talks about strengths of a student, areas that the student needs support. What are we going to do to support that student? What's the action coming out of this meeting? Who's going to be responsible for that action? What are the goals, and how are we going to monitor the progress or lack thereof? And so to have a common plan, again, will be pretty impactful for us as a whole district. And also, oftentimes students move from school to school within our district. And so having that common form and common understanding of what educational support team functions.
So does that, I just had a question on whether that follows students from,
Yes.
say, like elementary, if they go to BAMS and then to that. So
Yes.
the teachers or counselors or whoever would be able to see if this was a pattern of something.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mike.
What role does the student play themselves in the ESD process?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. In my work at the elementary school level, students are generally are not present at meetings. I would imagine when you get into middle school and high school, it's an opportunity for self-advocacy, for self-engagement in their own learning process. I can't speak to whether that is happening at the middle school and high school, but I think it's an important point. I come to administration from the field of special education, and there's a saying that goes, "Nothing about us without us," and so I think having that student voice when appropriate, and it often is appropriate, is valuable.
When I was at the high school, students were invited
Yeah.
to the EST meetings.
Yeah.
I would assume still.
And I have had some elementary EST meetings where students have led the meeting when appropriate, and that's been really cool as well.
Great. Yeah.
And may I interject?
Sure.
one point?
Yeah, please.
And to your point, Kelly, in terms of the EST following the child, that could happen. Absolutely could happen, and we have systems in place for that to occur. A central point with an EST is it's an intervention that we put into place, and that we continually, at a 6 to 8 week interval, reconvene to determine the efficacy of the interventions. The hope is that a child would be on an EST, and then after a 6 to, let's say, 12-week period, they would come off of the EST because the issue has resolved itself. We've provided the intervention. The child is, be it an attendance issue or an academic issue or an emotional behavioral support issue, has received what they need, so that therefore it's no longer required.
I guess my question kind of went to if they move to like BAMS
Mhm.
or to BUHS, whichever, wherever they're coming from, if that there from the lower grade was being used or being thought of as a helpful tool for the next school if they start to see something, if maybe it might, I would think that maybe if they were able to access that, they might say,
Yes.
aha, this
Yes.
makes sense, they can,
Yep.
and maybe help
Yeah.
to be an earlier intervention than
Yeah.
than otherwise might have been.
Yeah, and to add to that, when students transition from elementary to middle school, for example, we meet and we talk about every student who's on an EST plan, just to make sure that there's an opportunity for a continuation of supports when they go to the middle school.
It's really all the more reason to systematize
Yeah.
our work collectively as a
exactly.
school district.
Yep.
And that has really led the why behind the work.
Yeah.
Liz has a question.
Yeah, I want to build on what Tim was asking about the dropout. We know we have a high dropout rate, and obviously we want kids to stay in school, but there are going to be kids who will drop out. And one of my biggest concerns, which I raised last fall, is that even if a kid drops out of our school, I want that kid to leave with the idea that they're a learner. And I think that point has been missing for as long as I've lived in this area, is that when kids drop out, they drop out thinking either they're dumb and stupid and they can't learn, or they're a bad kid. And I would like and it's a bad time, I know, without having administrators, but I think that that's a really important thing for us to do for kids. If they're dropping out anyway, even, I use the example of let's let them have an independent study. And if it's video games they're interested in, let them do that. And then, if they drop out, at least they can walk away saying, well, I did that independent study and I did a great job. And because some of these kids who drop out will come back to education. They might be 30 or 35 or 40, but they'll come back, especially if they can leave with the knowledge that they're a learner. So because we're talking about this now, I want to raise the point again, because I think it fell on pretty much deaf ears last fall. It wasn't understood, but I think it's really critical for future success of the kids that be in place.
Can I comment on that, Liz? I think that's an important point, and I would say that dropout is a symptom of a problem that has probably been present for that student for years. Starting when they were in kindergarten through elementary school and middle school, where that message has probably been perpetuated for a long time, and that really hints at the importance of this work. Where we can be as proactive as we can to identify students who are struggling and who might be developing that poor self-talk or that poor self-image, and address it, really proactively with the wealth of supports that we have in our school, so that by the time they get to the high school, they don't have that self-talk. They know the school's a place for them where they can be successful because they have been.
Right, but sometimes like new trauma, where even a junior in high school can't bring it up, just can't. And then you see this like huge crash with the kid, but yet the student cannot emotionally bring it up. It's not safe. I mean, that's exactly what happened to me. And they pushed me right through, because they failed to give my mother notification that I missed too many days of school, so they let me graduate. But that happened to me, and I can see it happening to other kids, where you can't begin to speak about it yet. But I want everyone to leave our schools feeling like they're a success in some way. So yeah. But addressing it early is a great and wonderful thing.
Thank you, Liz. David, if you had a question?
How do you measure your progress toward student well-being? There's some comments about monitoring, and if somebody's absent, you can tell that they're not absent. That's an easy one. But what about the harder behavioral things or the messages you just talked about that they're getting from birth? How do you measure that? How do you know you're making progress? How do you tell us or prove to us that this works?
Yeah, I think that's an individualized puzzle to put together. Sometimes there are markers that you can look at. School attendance is one. Behavior referrals is a marker. And then there's, in education, we tend to gravitate towards quantitative data because that's measurable and you can look at it. And there's also qualitative measures. Are they engaging with you in the hallway when you say hello to them in the morning? Are
those on your forums?
Yeah. So it's something that we've
responses and stuff.
It's something that we've talked about among our team of that. Some of these things aren't measurable with quantitative data. You know what I mean? That you have to talk to students. You have to get to know them. You have to connect with their families. And a lot of that is where the evidence is.
But you can measure a sense of belonging to your school based on, outcomes of supports that are identified and provided for students and families.
What's an example?
Example would be you come to an EST meeting, child seems very depressed, not connected to school. You meet as a team with the family, you get as much information as you can about where the struggles are happening, and then you put in place supports. You put a social worker on the plan. You identify a go-to person in the building. You take away some of the intensity of a school day for a child so that they can just kind of ease into themselves. And then you come back, that's the key, is you come back 4 to 6 weeks later, all those players sit down at the table and we talk about what are we seeing. Is the child happier?
How do you measure that? I mean,
they can tell us, and we can see it through their actions and their investment in the school. Are they participating? Are they coming?
Are they participating in the classroom?
Right.
And in the cafeteria? That kind of movement, which is very soft, right? But I know that from my experience in those.
Identifying social groups that the counselor can help facilitate and just sharing that feedback. And parents will tell us. That's where we really hear it.
Right.
Parents can be at the table and say, my kid is actually a lot happier now than they were 6 weeks ago because of these supports and these adults that are now actively engaged in their school day.
That's actually the other question I had is, and this one you can't have a number. What percentage of the families that you try to get involved actually get involved?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it may vary from school to school. In my own experience, probably 2/3. I would say 2/3.
You don't track that though and see if it might be.
I don't have an exact number. That's just an estimation. But I would say parents are always not just invited to the meeting, but really stress that this is important. It's important for you to be there and flexible in timing and to make it as accessible as possible.
Does that get followed up in the middle school and high schools? Because in the elementary schools, well, at least several years ago, there was a concentrated effort to make sure that every single parent came to parent conferences. And if not, that they at least got a call or a visit.
Yeah.
But does anything like that happen in high schools? Anything that kind of follow up and that kind of it's a really strong effort to keep the parents engaged once they get out of the elementary schools in that sort of nice home setting?
Yeah, I can't speak for the high school, but we do student-led conferences at the middle school, and we do a fall teacher-led conference. They're well-attended. We fill all of our slots, and in the spring is a student-led. So kids set goals. It's been hindered a little with COVID, but typically the slots are all filled up, and so the kids create a presentation as a student-led conference. So there's better investment, so the kids are at the center of the conference. It's been
Yeah, I
very
was asking
successful.
more in terms of the students that have been identified and
Yeah.
are on an EST,
Yeah.
follow up and try to keep those families involved.
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, we have a pretty hefty EST. We have multiple EST teams. In fact, we have 4 EST teams in the middle school, 1 for each team. So, I don't run EST. The assistant principal does, but you know, the one thing we don't typically have a student in the meetings. We sometimes bring them in as part of a special ed meeting, but it might be something we'll consider moving ahead.
I think, you know, the reason for engaging in this work this year is because we've acknowledged that schools are in different places in terms of their EST and how they're supporting students and families and accessing the resources. So what we've done this year is we've established a benchmark and an ideal best practice moving forward. So I think I've talked before about accountability moving forward. You know, so that's the plan moving forward, is that there is that accountability that, you know, we've done the work, we've identified the EST process. Now is it happening? Or are we falling back on, you know, old habits? So
that was my last question, is how are you tracking the continuity school to school? Because there is a lot of variety, we keep hearing about that.
Yeah.
And in this case, there are obviously best practices better. How do you follow up and make sure that they're changing in the direction that you know works best?
Yep. And I think one strategy is how we develop our monthly admin meetings and provide expectations for people to bring data, bring your EST protocols. Where are you in the process? How many ESTs have you had? How is it functioning? So, you know, pair that pressure with also some heat and some expectation that there's follow through. I think Julianne wanted to jump in.
Oh, I just was going to say, in terms of parent engagement in the process, one tool we have now, of course, is Zoom. So I would say, like, at Demerson School, I mean, we have all parents attending, you know, partnering with us to make that plan. And because of Zoom, you know, because Zoom allows us to schedule around their work schedules and have the meeting at a time that works for them, and that has been huge. Of course, we did the Zooming because of COVID at first, but now parents can come in person if they'd like to come in and have an in-person meeting. But a lot of times parents actually request Zoom because they can do it on a work break. So that, you know, that's something that 5 years ago was not something, you know, a tool that I had at my disposal. If I tried to set up a video conference with a parent, it would have run into all these tech issues. And now it's just something, it's like it's an automatic. So that's huge. So we've had, you know, we have pretty much 100% attendance in terms of parents, which is great. That's like kind of the foundation of the EST plan, is that it's a partnership between the families, the student, and the school. And so you have to have those players involved.
I would say related to that, you know, one of the things that we've talked about as our next step as a leadership team, right, is how to communicate this process to our families and to the community, that these educational support teams are really a resource for them, you know, and for our students, you know, and so how do we, you know, communicate that to the people that we're working with, you know, through our website and you know, various community outlets. But that's something that we're thinking about as our next step.
Are the teams in each school, so tell me if I'm not understanding this correctly. So the teams in each school are communicating with the principals, correct?
Principals are active members of the
Okay,
EST teams.
and so how are the teams themselves, are they communicating amongst, I mean, if something seems to be working in one and they say, oh, we're trying this, it's a great idea, how do they communicate it with the other teams to say, would this be a solution to something? I mean, how is that communication happening?
I would say it's currently not happening, but I think that that's, again, part of the reason why we do this work to sort of unify our district approach, so that we have sort of a common experience that we can reflect on. And as Mark mentioned, having administrative presence in all of these educational support teams, and then having the administrators have a chance to sort of reflect together, I think is an important part of the process.
I think the other piece we have is a toolkit that Deb Harding and the coaches have been making that talks about assessments, and I hope that's going to really expand to offer a list of intervention ideas that we've tried and had either success or not success with, so that we aren't recreating the wheel every time. And what works for one student may not work for another student, even though it looks like the same problem. So it's one try is often not enough. It's multiple tries or multiple ideas.
I have a question. Yeah. I'm curious, first of all, it's amazing that this isn't already systematized and uniform across every school, never mind our supervisory union. So when you guys came together, what did you use to measure who was doing it well versus maybe where there were weak areas, and how did you determine best practice, and how will you determine if the path you chose was the best path forward?
That's a really good question, and it's not an easy answer.
I'm sure
to
it's
that
not.
question.
Yeah, well, I can speak to our process a little bit. So we in consulting literature, we identified sort of 5 core components of the EST process, right? Pre-referral process, the referral process, what the meeting looks like, including who's there, that's an important piece. The development of a plan, and then follow-up and monitoring. And we got together at a leadership team meeting, and we all highlighted strengths and areas of need within our own individual schools in each of those 5 areas, just as a conversation starter. So we looked at, pre-referral, what's happening in all of our schools across the district that we're really proud of, and maybe areas that we need to grow in that particular, part of the EST process. And it led to a really, really good, enriching conversation about really neat things that are happening in pockets within our district that are not necessarily universal. And then that sort of led to conversations of, okay, what do we hold as core values that we can share across all of our schools based on work that is happening, but not necessarily universally.
And to add to
The
that,
key
Jim?
thing I would like to add is we made a critical decision fairly early on in the process, is that we were committed to developing a school district EST, which meant there would be some give and take from school to school based on what's currently in practice. So we made that commitment, I would say October, that was an important goal for us moving forward. And I think that helped us get to the point where we are today, and not to a point where everybody's still doing their own thing, because that's what they had developed 5 years ago. So we had that really, real conversation of the value of having a systematic approach for a supervisory union. Gotcha.
I guess I'll put it this way, we're not making it up. The state of Vermont has for many years put out guidance around best practice with ESTs. I know for Guilford School, a number of years ago, we worked with a consultant from the state of Vermont in the creation of our process. And from the forms, the process that John's been talking about, et cetera. This past summer, there was a very lengthy 2-day workshop that the state of Vermont In the context of Act 173, which I know that you folks have spoken about, and 173 is really about improving core instruction and changes with special ed law and special ed eligibility rules, et cetera. So the state put out a 2-day workshop. It was people attended either Zoom or they purchased the presentation to view at a different time because they couldn't make the 2-day workshop. I know for Guilford School, we purchased that workshop, and then my EST team and myself, I'm a member of the team, we spent 2 days in early August viewing the workshop, reviewing our processes. We were doing that at the same time that there are people here within our district. Liz Dimmick's name's been brought up at the last meeting and at the beginning of this presentation. Liz and John really shepherded us through this process. Liz viewed that workshop and gleaned from it those best practices. So as we were having these conversations, that was in the background. That is the frame from which we worked and started with. And looking at all of our schools and determining, okay, where are best practices already occurring, what can we learn from that, et cetera, and the end result has been something that is systematized for our entire school district. And I think it is a fruit of consolidation in terms of creating a single school district. It's also goes to Act 173, and Mark alluded to a lengthier presentation regarding MTSS at our next meeting, and EST is a critical element within an MTSS system. And then thirdly, I'm going to tout Mark's leadership. Mark has been consistent from the very beginning of this school year. This is what we're going to be working on because this is at the heart of an improving an entire school system. And so those together, it's again, we're not making this up. We are looking at best practice. We're looking at our agency of ed. We're looking at lessons learned throughout our schools and looking at exemplars. And then we're consistently working through it for the entire year.
When you said that there was professional development, was that towards those who are part of these teams, or was that in general for our educators to better identify when a referral is indicated, or what did that look like? I'm just curious.
It was open to any educator that was interested. It was targeted to teams, pre-existing EST teams, special ed administrators, superintendents, principals, special educators, classroom teachers. So in my case, my EST team, which comprises of counselors, special educator, classroom teachers, academic support teachers, and myself, we scheduled and gathered together to view the workshops and then to have very rich conversations prior to the beginning of the school year in order for us to be functioning at a very high level. And then we as an administrative team have been engaged in this work all year.
So Nancy, you looked like you had a question or comment, and then I'm gonna bring it to Deborah, and then we're going to try to quickly wrap this up because we do have a few other things.
Yeah.
And we'll give you the last moment to wrap it up if you.
So I wanted to just give you an example of something that was not universal, but we decided was best practice and should really happen, and that's Kid Talk. And Kid Talk is, and John, please step in if I get it wrong because I've only done it a couple of times now. But Kid Talk is really about what do we know about this student, what do we think we know about this student, and what are we seeing about this student. And I think it was more universally used at some of our elementary schools and not so much used at the high school level because their team is constantly changing. But it's really a really important step in identifying what's going on And so we made that a universal practice for everybody. And so now we're engaging at it at all of our schools. We're engaging with it at all of our schools, and it's really helpful and really important, but had somehow like missed the step of being K-12.
So I appreciate the need to identify students and issues and to provide a way of tracking in a very supportive, positive way that then follows the student from year to year. I do know, however, that when I was in a public school, teaching as well as a private school, we were not given access to that information at all, in any form, because it is tracking. And so when you identify an issue early on, and then with the beginning of a new year, classroom teachers have access to a prior concern, it can actually be, even for the best of individuals, a trigger. You then look at that student in a particular way, and it is a very classy way of tracking. And so in the institutions that I worked for, we were not allowed to have this information. So we had to form our own understanding of that student. And then maybe it came to the dean from the classroom teacher. So how do you deal with that? Because that's a tricky issue.
Yeah, that's a good, I'll speak to that and then please jump in. It's a really good point, Deborah, right? There's a lot of research around expectations, right? And how expectations dictate subconsciously or subconsciously how we interact with people. It's human nature, it's what happens, right? And if your first introduction to a student is that they can't do A, B, and C, right? That's gonna impact you as a teacher. And so, what I would say to that is you'll notice in the plan that we developed as a district, the first and foremost information isn't student deficiency, right? Isn't student struggle, it's student strengths. It's what students are good at. It's their interests. It's what they bring to the table. It's what makes them want to come to school. It's sort of that information. And so that's sort of why we put that lens on the plan development itself, just to try to flip the script a little bit from a deficiency model to a strength model. And then in terms of sharing information from one teacher to the next, I think your concern is valid. There's validity to that. And so what I would say is we sort of make student by student decisions around what is really critical information for a receiving teacher to get, and wins an opportunity for a teacher to get to know a student and then connect with them around supports that we might provide for that student.
I think to your point, the other powerful thing about EST plans is they're fluid.
Yes.
It's not a set in stone plan.
Right.
It's a fluid plan where we're coming to the table after a certain amount of time, all the players, and we're evaluating. Is this working? Is the child thriving with these supports? Or do adjustments need to be made?
Right.
So I think that's an important point to emphasize. The intention is not to track and to stay with that intervention. It's to be fluid and to continue to move forward.
So then my follow-up is, at the point that you feel that you have resolved an issue, whether it's absenteeism or lack of connection in a community, when you feel you've resolved it, is the plan then put to the side so that the receiving teacher does not have access to it? Yes, that's a definite yes. Okay.
Yeah. So plans, as John mentioned, I think before, plans do phase out.
Okay.
And that's an important part of the process. So it's not like if you're If you're on an EST plan in first grade, you're always on a plan. The goal is to phase them out. And once they're no longer.
And that means that the receiving teacher cannot access those records at all.
Yeah, they would not, yes, yeah. And that's my understanding of the process. I can't speak to other schools. But.
So once the
Yeah,
plan is done.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay, like the plan doesn't stay in the cumulative file.
Good, okay,
Right.
Yeah.
okay.
And that's not to mean that you wouldn't remember that you had Nancy Weiss as a student and
Right.
she was on a plan and you tried X intervention. And it worked, or it didn't work and you tried something else that did. And the important part of the fluid plan is that you're constantly in that review process every 4 to 6 weeks to see if things are improving. So it's assess the issue, determine what intervention you're gonna try and reassess. Are you being successful? And either try something else or keep going until the problem's resolved.
Thank you. I'm gonna give David a 2-second, and then what I'm gonna say is if you can send us that PowerPoint, and if we have any more questions, maybe we would forward them to Mark to filter along.
Thank you for giving us time to ask all these questions, get this information, 'cause we have, as Mark knows, he gets lists of questions all the time. And he doesn't have time to answer all of it, so this is great. But it sounds like, despite what Deborah just said, that for that information that you just described, to not go with that student to the next year, all of that knowledge and all that experience and all of that learning among the staff does not go with that student, and then the next DST has to start from scratch from what you were saying about it not necessarily coming with the students. So just, that seems like a weakness in the program that would be worth trying to find.
It's only if they expect, like, we said, it's like a goal. What do we want the student to be able to do at the end of this plan?
Right.
Once that's met, there is no need for the plan anymore, and then it goes away.
But for the kid that gets a message, the kid that drops out at the end, that's been getting this message all along, they don't come to that happy conclusion at the end of 4th grade. So
it
In
will
our-
continue.
Right, in our case, the EST team, which is a confidential team of people, the principal, the, counselor, special educators, we keep retired plans. Like, we hold retired plans, so that if we had a student, the first thing I do, if I have a student referred for EST, right, as the principal, I would look, and I would look and say, oh, right, I'd look back at an old, to see if there's retired plans that are there. So yes, because that work has been done and we follow that data as it
does
goes along.
that happen in 9th grade? Do they call you and say,
Yes.
this was this kid on the
Right, and most
It does.
families, I will say, want the plan carried forward. Like
Yes.
most families, like I always have families wanting, like, okay,
Sure the plan goes with
like
it?
I wanna make sure that the receiving teacher has this information, this has worked really well, we really want this to work, or the student really, which I think, in the list of critical elements that the state provided, one of them, right, is it's an asset-based approach, but it's also this idea of a partnership, so it's understanding yourself as a learner. And so that's why, yes, a lot of that work people want to carry forward because it's like, oh, this is like my key, to unlocking, this thing that's been difficult, yeah.
The third or more of the parents that don't engage, that doesn't happen for those kids. If the family's not involved in doing that pushing,
It
it
doesn't happen in a
doesn't.
formal way, because we can't build a formal plan that is, we need permission from a parent in order to build a formal plan and put so you know your child best. So to have a meeting about your child without you present is not our best case scenario. That does not mean we would not intervene and support the student in learning what they need to learn, but it means that we would have to go about it in a different way. Wouldn't necessarily be the EST format. It's like, I can't.
That raises questions for
Okay,
me.
all right,
It does.
That raises questions.
So-
Maybe I'm not.
That raises.
So I'm gonna sort of, I
Yeah.
hate to cut it off here, we are getting down to, tightness in the agenda, so if you can send us that, and if there, anticipate that we would have more questions, et cetera. And maybe it's just asking for clarification, and maybe there'll be another meeting that you can provide some clarification if there seems like there are questions that we,
Yeah.
you
on
know,
this
send,
issue.
so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. So now we're going to very quickly move on to the fiscal report. Mr. Rucker, do you have anything for us?
So we met prior to this meeting, the Finance Committee. We reviewed revenue projections as kind of an extension of the previous meeting where we reviewed expenditures for this fiscal year. On a super quick recap is of our $55 million revenue budget, we received, we have either recorded or expect to receive all but at this point 3.6 million. We know where those receivables are. We reviewed that and we sort of identified the largest sources of funding. 43 million out of that 55 is the general state support grant. And then we have nearly 4 million in tuition. That's our, so it goes from 43 million to our largest source to 4 million is our next largest source. And we're very close to being on track with that as we close out the fiscal year. We talked a little bit about the ESSER funding. That's about 3 million of our fiscal year 22. That's the one that if we don't complete projects in fiscal year 22, we will be transferring both the grant revenue and the reserve for spending into the capital plan for fiscal year 23. So that's probably where we spent most of our time. But in general, we don't see significant variances from FY22 as we close out the fiscal year in about 3 weeks. The other topics we talked about are also covered in the new business, but from a fiscal point of view, just a quick mention to the full board that we have a substantial number of projects, 2 of which have motions for bid awards. We have substantial underway over the summer. We're hoping to keep those projects moving through various sequences. And then I also wanted to mention just today we had a meeting with the Agency of Ed, sort of an extension of the capital plan where we're going in and replacing windows. The legislature, I'm sure you're aware, recognized issues around testing, particularly specifically PCBs. Burlington High School sort of created a statewide awareness and the need for resources, both technical and financial. So we've started that process. For us, it's been oriented around replacing windows for much more energy efficient and better lighting, better environmental conditions for our students. And in that process, Academy School passed with flying colors in terms of we expected some asbestos, that's abatement is scheduled, no PCBs, but just today we learned in our work preparing for the Oak Grove building that we do have some PCBs in the caulking in the windows. It's just the beginning of a process that the state will inform us, you know, what's next, what are the notification requirements, what are the remediation requirements. They did say today with the samples that we have taken, you know, certainly no need to disrupt school or change what we're doing, but they will be informing us of a testing schedule and then a remediation plan based on the results of the testing within 6 weeks. So, you know, and again, there's a fiscal impact, but I do expect the recent legislation to protect the district's interests there, both from a safety and financial. Anything else I missed on our finance committee discussion? David had some questions about looking at maybe solar development, so something we'll be looking at as well as time goes on.
So the work that needs to be done, with contaminants, will that be taken care of during the summer when students are not present?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear that there are intermediate solutions that don't seem to be particularly difficult to address. Things like if there's going to be an air sampling, and if there's an issue around PCBs permeating the building, because what do they call it? I forgot the term they used that says that it can absorb into other materials. But it's a matter of painting that surface with a paint that seals that kind of flow. So it did not seem, particularly difficult for us to comply. Ideally, we will be removing any of those substances, but
There were mitigating factors we could put in place until those windows could be removed safely and,
part of the capital plan is to remove those old glass block windows in all of the schools that have them. Oak Grove is one, Guilford has them, Academy has them. PCBs were used in building products prior to 1980. They were banned after that. So it's our construction between 1950 and 1980 where we've got to really focus on that. So we were really pleased that the hardship of Burlington is going to inform our path ahead in a much better way for kids.
and stuff.
And staff and families and community, yes, everybody.
Well, we have just about 7 minutes left until the 8 o'clock mark. So I'm gonna make a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes. And
Second.
thank you, David. So I made the motion, David, second. All those in favor of extending the meeting for 15 minutes, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have 20 minutes to get the rest of the stuff done if we can. Did you have anything else for the fiscal other than the two things?
No, just the new business items would be very important that we do take action, so that we
Thank you
keep
very much.
things
We
moving
will
on.
move on to the next item, the first item in the new business, the Act 250 School Impact Questionnaire. And Mark, did you have some?
Yes, so this is for a project, Commonwealth Dairy, 66 Pauls Road in Brattleboro. The project consists of the addition of moving a bed of biofilm reactor and suspended air flotation system at the facility on Pauls Road to address violations related to wastewater. The client has had a series of violations of the pre-treatment permit and is now required by the state to construct the additional wastewater treatment. This treatment was originally included in the scope of the 2018 permitting process, but was never built. These improvements are not expected to increase Commonwealth Dairy staff. Commonwealth Dairy will utilize existing staff for this project, and we do not anticipate that this will have any impact on the school system.
So we need to approve that?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the Act 250 School Impact Questionnaire?
So moved.
David moved and Michelle seconded. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the Act 250 School Impact Questionnaire, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We will move on to the Ellen P. Darrow Scholarship, and I will turn it over to Ann.
Okay, the Daryl Scholarship was established in Putney back in the 50s through the generosity of the Darrow family. It benefits a Putney student who is moving on to college or to a trade school. And we decided to preserve the intentions of the Darrow family by having the Putney School Board representatives make the selection and seeking approval from this board. It's most in spirit with what they asked. So after a very difficult discussion, I would like to move that this board approve presenting the L&P Darrow Scholarship to Noah Head.
Is there a second?
Second. We'll let Liz do it.
Okay, so that's Ann first, made the motion, and Liz was the second. All those in favor of the L&P Darrow Scholarship going to Noah Head, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Ann and Liz.
Congratulations, Noah.
So we will now move on to the authorization for Finance Committee to act on board's behalf for fiscal year 23 capital project bids and to approve warrants and payrolls in July and August.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Sean and second by David. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm abstaining, I don't know enough about it.
Okay, do we,
We could have discussion.
we could have discussion and then we could
Okay,
I'd like that
Because-
too.
okay.
Yeah.
because I understand that this board will probably meet in July and August. And I have certainly faith in the system, but one of our main responsibilities is fiduciary oversight. And I just feel a little uncomfortable in relinquishing that.
Okay, David.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. The thing is, if we don't meet, and it's not at all determined, that we will, we might meet in committees. We haven't really had that conversation about July and August. But if we don't, some of these projects won't be able to be approved. And particularly the awarding of the bids so that they can get started. So there needs to be sort of, if we meet regularly, then Frank can bring, these can come to the full board. But if
Yeah.
not, then the committee can authorize the awarding of the bids. And there are lots of legal requirements around the bidding process as well. So
And it doesn't preclude updates even if we agree to this.
changing their minds.
If we meet in July, we would plan an update.
If we meet in July, certainly.
So similar to the personnel being hired, right, in the summer months,
Yeah,
but it makes, also, I know summer meeting schedule is F on this list, but, I think July, we will traditionally take off, in August, we're scheduling training and retreats and things like that, so, to be able to move forward with this kind of business in a timely manner is important for the district.
Okay.
I just think it's very important to be nimble. Frank's been working very diligently to make all these things come together. And so he has to make sure that the vendors and all the things are in place. And if you don't have the approval right at the right moment, it makes it much more difficult. So you can lose out if it's not nimble. And so it has to be.
Yeah, okay.
Deborah, did you have a?
I'm hearing this conversation, yes.
And the other thing is that the next two items on the agenda are motions where we are gonna vote to award bids.
Okay.
So do we want to re-vote?
Sure.
So it was, who made, Sean, you made the motion, and David, you second. All those in favor of authorization for Finance Committee to act on board's behalf fiscal year 23 capital project bids and to approve warrants and payrolls in July and August, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay. Thank you, we'll move on from there. So we'll move on to motion to award the Guilford Central School HVAC bid to BG Mechanical in the amount of $225,860.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So Michelle and Ann, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Motion to award the Academy School HVAC bid to BG Mechanical in the amount, it was the same,
Same vendor,
Okay,
different school, different amount.
okay, in the amount of $374,988. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now we are on to summer meeting schedule.
I had a thought about that, we've had to cover this before, but we meet again on the 21st, and I think we might be able to judge better then, if we have any, questions that haven't been answered or issues that haven't been addressed, that would mean that we would need to meet within the next 2 weeks or not,
Okay.
and hold off putting a schedule together until we see if there are things we know we're gonna need to meet about.
Okay, and then I guess, Mark, what I would ask you is if there is something that you feel, maybe you can give us kind of a status at that meeting then, to let us know, we can then use that to assess what we might need or as far as meeting in the summer then.
Great.
That would be helpful. Okay, so, does everyone want to table the, summer meeting schedule till the next meeting?
Sounds good.
Okay, anyone online, Liz or Emily? You good with that?
You can just do that.
to me.
Okay.
Sounds
We-
good.
Sounds good.
I'm here too, it's Lana.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lana. Okay, so we will table that then until next meeting. So it looks like we have 4 executive sessions. So, we didn't have any other, nobody else had any other business, right?
Sorry, I just started laughing.
Yours is
Just came right out. We know we're building a way to get out. Sorry about that.
I'm just being clear, that's what we got, that's what we're facing, so, I'm going to make the motion for the board to go into executive session based on, after making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All those in favor of going into executive session under that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so then I will direct my motion to the specific statute. I think they're all under contract, aren't they?
No, there was contracts and, some evaluations.
This and it's this. So,
Those are both contracts, yeah. And this is contract. Yeah.
and that's, so,
Yep.
I will make a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts for all 4, and 2 of them I would invite Mark to attend. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm gonna give it to Michelle. And all those in favor of going into executive session under that statute, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there a motion to approve, my communication of a statement as presented in executive session?
So moved. Second.
So it sounds
Moved by
like
Ann, seconded by Michelle.
all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
You got it.
thank you.
Liz, are you opposing?
There's no sound.
Michelle.
Oh,
No sound.
Liz, can you hear us?
I can't do sound without the echo from BCTV.
Well,
We couldn't hear anything you guys were saying.
We
so I
made a motion to
Good.
approve the letter as presented in executive session.
Okay.
And,
Try muting yourself again.
Anne made the motion, Michelle second. Do you, either one of you, approve or?
Yes,
Okay, all right, so we are good. So Then we will, I need a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Ann. And it was seconded by Liz, it sounded like. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 9:37.
So I'm gonna do a body count.